Welcome to this edition of Clinical Clips, an accredited continuing education activity. This brief 5-minute expert video will spotlight the daily hot topics from the conference.
Hi, this is Doug Dietrich, reporting to you back from Easl in Vienna, the 50th annual Easl. Well, today we're going to talk about posters, since there were no new abstracts presented today, the best of the posters, and there are some really good ones here this year. Let's talk about the HIV ones first. There were actually 3, declatosphere plus sofosbuvir, the Ally 2 study, and the SVR rate was 96%, very, very impressive. That was actually juxtaposed to the ION 4 study presented by Curtis Cooper, also sofosbuvir, ladipasvir together, 96%, exactly the same SVR rate in that group. And then there was a study called C-EDGE, which showed a 95%. And that actually used the 2 drugs, grazoprevir and elbasvir. So basically the bottom line is HIV is no longer a special population. SVR rates are the same as those in patients who don't have HIV. So speaking of former special populations, there was a poster from Target on renal failure patients. It looks like sofosbuvir containing regimens did very well in renally impaired patients. And there was a Merck presentation in renal failure patients also showing that excellent SVR rates in patients with creatinine clearances less than 30. So it looks like even the renal failure patients on dialysis are no longer a special population either. Things are looking really good for these former special populations. We saw several presentations from TRIO and Target. Both of those are big real-world networks, reported mostly on SimSof combinations in the real world, and the numbers were exceedingly good in the 80s, in the high 80s mostly, and actually they came very close to the Optimus 1 and Optimus 2 official trials run by Janssen, which was an 83% SVR in the cirrhotic. So not only is there good news on the DAA front overall, but there's good news from the real world, from the front actually, from the front lines in the battle against hepatitis C, that everything that you see in the clinical trials will be very close to that in the real world. And then finally, it's not over yet. We have new drugs coming, and people are trying shorter duration. So we saw a real groundbreaking presentation by Ed Gain looking at sofosbuvir with 5816. 5816 is a next generation NS5A combined with GS 9857, which is a second generation new wave protease inhibitor, which is pan-genotypic. And he looked at 4 and 6 weeks in patients with and without cirrhosis, many of whom had failed many prior therapies, including some that are no longer being developed. And just like the other studies that we saw, 4 weeks clearly looks like it's not enough. 6 weeks, even with these 3 super second and third generation drugs, looks good, about 93%, but really not quite good enough. So it looks like 8 weeks may be the sweet spot for these new combination therapies of 3 drugs, 3 different combinations, a nucleotide, a protease inhibitor, and an NS5A. And this actually exactly parallels the data we saw from C-SWIFT with sofosbuvir combined with grazoprevir and elbasvir. 4 weeks was not enough. 6 weeks was better, but 8 weeks seems to be where the sweet spot is. So we've got great news for HIV patients, great news for renal failure patients, great news from the front lines. Real world data looks exactly the same as clinical trials data, and the future is bright for triple combinations that are pan-genotypic that will probably go for 8 weeks and get close to 100% for all genotypes. Thanks for your attention and watching us today from Vienna. This is Dr. Doug Dietrich signing off from the 50th Easl Conference.
We hope you found this activity useful and educational. To receive continuing education credit and to download your printable certificate, please return to the activity webpage and click on the Claim Credit button associated with today's clinical clip.